Hello and welcome to the first episode of the panel.net overview in new ZELS version 2. In this episode we will look at the basics of accessing the panel.net, building your first panel, having an understanding of the UI, and then loading historic panels, getting into it, turning it into game. Panel.net is only accessible outside of vehicles. You cannot be in a vehicle when it's kind of accessing it as such. And to access it, you will do /ELS panel.net, and you'll see the little prompt there, and it will probably say the resource name as well below it. You'll click enter. You'll be presented with this UI. So here you have a couple of options. Obviously, if you want to create a new panel, you can click the create panel button. If we want to load a panel, so a historic panel that we've created, or if we want to exit the menu and return back to our game. Okay, so just to demonstrate, exit just takes you straight back to your game. So we'll reopen this. Okay, so load panel. Load panel shows historic panels I've worked on. As you can see here, I've got a test panel that I've done previously. You can see a couple of things about it: the name, the panel ID, which I'll touch on either in this episode or a future one, the number of elements in them, and when the panel was last updated. From here, you can also load the panel, which I'll quickly show you. So you can see I've got this panel here. You can copy the panel, or you could delete the panel. For some communities you may have, or servers, you may have an additional number of panels, so there is also a search feature which will refine down that search, which I will show you once we've created a panel. Okay, there's also a refresh button there if you've created something else, another user has created a panel and you'd like to see that. Of course, panel.net, like any of our scripts, can be permissioned. So you can permission panel.net, and we would recommend that for larger servers that you don't want people going in and editing panels, because any edits you make to this panel, if this is attached to a vehicle, that panel will change, and I will touch on permissioning in a future episode. Getting into it, we're going to create a panel, and in here we can name it and define the dimensions. So in this case, we're going to name it video panel, or you can name your vehicle if you're going to make it specific for a vehicle or a fleet, or anything you think is specific. And we'll keep the default width and height for now. So we'll click create, and you'll see you're instantly presented with a really nice UI, really intuitive to use. So what we'll do is we'll start from the top and we'll work our way across and down. So along the top, we've got obviously the close button, very self-explanatory. It closes, this takes you back to the main menu. So don't need to show you that one. Save. Saving will obviously save any changes you've got going on. You can export the panel. And what this does is it copies it to your clipboard. So every panel that you make is stored as a JSON. And for a lot of you that may use JSON files, pretty much this allows you to send it to another community, send it to somebody to work on whatever you may need to do. The position button, so this is the most important thing on this, I would say. So the position function allows you to 1, set the position of the panel on your screen, and 2, define the size of it. So we're going to click position. You can also, I've got this really kind of intuitive panel here. So this is currently how big my panel is. Location and size. So let's say we're going to create a panel down here. So we're going to resize it to a nice size. So let's say we're going to create a nice like long thin panel. If I'm happy, I'll then click apply, and you'll see that the canvas is now resized to that. So I'm not putting elements in places that won't necessarily be visible. And autosave pretty much will auto-save your changes every minute or so. So you can have that enabled, or you can have that disabled. That's up to you. I'm going to keep it disabled for now. Okay, moving on to the next bit. we're going to look at the canvas, or the kind of toolbar as such. So the toolbar, you've got the object selector here. Like any paint editor, this is your way of selecting an object. Okay, so within this you can select something on the thing, it will then show the properties over here. Okay, you've then got your shape tool. So with your shape tool you can have, obviously there's a more up-to-date version that shows all the correct icons next to it. However, self-explanatory, you've got a shape. For this shape you can obviously name the element. What do you want it to be called? The position, the width and the height. You can obviously also do that through the shape itself. While we're over in the properties section, we'll touch on some other things. So the background. Has it got a coloured background? Yes, fine. Is it transparent? Has it got a border? Obviously with borders, border radius 0 means there's no border. Border radius 1 means there is. I'll just show this here and set it to a bit more visible colour. You can see that it's got a small border now. Obviously you can increase that as much as you need. And border width, how wide the border is. So border radius is how tight the circle is, kind of roundness of the shape, and then obviously border width is how big the border is itself. And opacity, that's very self-explanatory. How visible is the shape? We'll touch on state configuration in a future episode. However, this is where you can configure the properties of a shape depending on the state that a vehicle is in. You can have certain shapes show when you're on scene, when you're en route, when you haven't got any lights on, if you've got your rear reds on, all of that. And like anything, like any kind of editor, you've obviously got your layer controls here. So do you want to lock it, meaning that you can't move it, you can't do anything to it. You can move it right to the top, down, up, bottom, or you can hide it. And to unhide it, you can come into the layers tab and unhide it, or you can lock it as well. Okay, so moving on, we now got text. Text is somewhat the same. It appears in a box to begin with. However, you can change the element name, and element names are just what appears in here pretty much. So then position, width and height, obviously be adjusted via this again. Is it transparent? Yes or no? Border width, border radius, same as before. Then we get to text properties. What's in the text box, or the text area, as I'm going to call it? So we'll say this is a button for something. Let's say on scene, and we'll make it perfectly square as well. So there, we've got our on scene button there, and we'll make it a transparent background. Or let's make it a blue background. Just hide that. There we go. So we've got our on scene kind of button or text box there. So the cool thing is anything can be a button. So you have your dedicated buttons here. However, anything here can be a button, and we'll touch on that in a future episode as to kind of how they work. But these are more designed for text boxes more than anything. So you can align your text in the box how you want. Set the font type. Let's set it to Comic Sans. And then font weight, is it bold? Is it light? What type is it? And same again, state configuration and layer control. Okay, move my shape over here as well. So with the canvas, we've set our size up here. We've defined how big our canvas is, and navigating, especially on a larger canvas or where you've got very particular details, could be quite difficult. So to do so, you have a couple of ways of navigating the canvas. You can either hold Control and scroll to zoom, and what it will do is it will zoom into the cursor itself, or you can use the zoom icons up here. You can use the autofocus button, which will automatically fit the canvas in view, or you can use you can hold your shift button and left click and move about the canvas. I'm moving about the canvas. Okay, so we've got our canvas the size we want it. We've got a couple of shapes here. Let's think about building a bit of a panel. So I've got my on scene button here. Let's have got a shape here for something else. So I'm going to place that, let's place that here. And actually I want an image. I want an image on this. So I'm going to put an image in. And images work the same. You've got your layout, appearance, border radius. So you can either act the button. And when we say act the button, it means that you can have like an image of a panel item, for example. And you can directly interact with that image rather than having to place a button over the top of it, for example. So you can either reference local images using the local reference, which is placed inside your web and images folder for the resource, so you can access them that way, or you can paste in a remote link, and that works exactly the same. So either remote link or local link as such. So I'll pretend this is like our panel header. Okay. And another thing to point out is the snapped grid. So snapped grid pretty much defines, do you want it, so this massive grid in the background, you can define if you want it to snap to the grid or not. And you can define how big the grid is here. So say for example I want just it to be quite large, then you can set the grid larger so it snaps to kind of larger distances, or you can decrease it all the way down to 5, which means you've got a higher degree of accuracy. However, by default this is enabled. You can disable it and you can place an item wherever you want. That's up to you. However, I'm going to keep snap to grid enabled. So you can toggle the grid visibility down here as well, so you can actually turn the grid off if you don't want to use it. However, as I say, I'm going to keep that enabled for now. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've created a shape, created a text box, created an image, and a button is exactly the same. So we've spawned or added in the 4 objects, and I'm using the cursor to move them about. In the next episode we'll talk about reactive and interactive panels. How can we make these elements interactive? How can we make them cause or do something to a vehicle? And how can we make buttons interact and change, or how can we make images or shapes change depending on the state of the vehicle? Okay, and you can look out for that in episode 2.